Well, as we hear the strains of my theme song, Carriage and Pair, fade off into the distance, I explained on our first show why I used that wonderful theme song. I think it's wonderful. An homage to John Henry Falk, a great CBS radio personality way back in the day, but back in the day when I was a teenager in New York. And welcome to FYI with Barry ZeVAN, and it is a joy and privilege and honor to welcome our guest today, Rudy Maxa, the host of public television's series Rudy Maxa's World. And Rudy has been a friend for a long time. I'm very proud to say, welcome, dear friend.
Nice to be here, Barry. Congratulations on the new show.
Thank you very much. Congratulations on all you've done. And I think people who have watched, how many shows have you done? Hundreds?
No, almost 100. I think we've got about 98 half-hour episodes on. It might be 99, might be 100. I don't know, but it's close to that. And all but two of them are half-hour episodes outside of the United States.
Yeah,
so
you've been all over the world. How many countries have you tallied it up yet?
You know, I did once because somebody asked me, and I can't remember what it came to. 60 maybe. That sort of sticks in my mind. But
wow.
But I was an Army brat, so I grew up a lot in Germany. My dad was stationed there twice, and we would take weekend trips. And of course, from Germany, you can zip over to France or Switzerland or all kinds of places. So a lot of that was just weekend travel.
So you got the bug pretty early.
I did. Well, I thought that's how everyone lived. You know, when you live on an Army post and all your fellow kids, the students in your school, everybody moved every year or two, you just presumed that's what everyone does and did. And it was quite a shock the first time I lived in civilian place, which was Cleveland, Ohio, and I don't know, I was in the fourth, fifth grade. I'm terrible on years. And my dad was stationed in Turkey, and there was no housing for dependents. So my mother, my baby brother, and I lived with my Czech grandmother in the Czech-Polish neighborhood in Cleveland. And it was just surprising to me that all my classmates had lived there their whole life and presumed they would be living there their whole life. So it's what you grow up with, I think.
It's marvelous. Well, you've certainly made it into a magnificent series. I guess there are so many people who ask you the same question, but I guess I'll ask too. What are your favorite places?
Yeah, well, I've developed an answer to that because I've asked it all the time. I think it's somewhere that someone discovers later in life, and it's a surprise. I mentioned that my dad was stationed in Europe twice, and we traveled all over Europe. I never got to Asia till I was, I don't know, 32 or 33. And when I got in Asia, I was just gobsmacked, flabbergasted, fabulous, the most amazing thing in the world. But I realized that if my dad had been stationed in Asia, and I didn't get to Paris or Barcelona or Rome till I was 32 or 33 or 34, I would have been similarly impressed. So I think it's something that surprises. You know, we lived in many places in the United States, but we were never west of the Mississippi. I didn't go west of the Mississippi until I was a college student. I was going to school in Appalachia, in Athens, southeastern Ohio, Athens, Ohio, to Ohio University, and there was some sort of journalism convention. I was a student journalist in California, and I'd never been west of the Mississippi, and it was winter, and I landed in California, where there are palm trees in Bougainvillea, Southern California. I was like, why am I going to school in Ohio? What is this? So again, that becomes a favorite place of mine. But I'm sure if I had, again, grown up in Southern California and went to New England for the first time and saw snow, I'd probably be going, well, this is fabulous. So it's all relative, I think, to your experience.
Yeah. You also, in many of your episodes, and I think in all of your episodes, you at least display an Epicurean bent for fantastic food. How did that develop?
Well, you know, I started doing the series with a Seattle production company called Small World Productions, who had gotten its start filming Rick Steves, the travel show, who does Rick Steves Europe, a series on public television as well. This is about 10 years before I started. And after 5 seasons or so of filming, Rick went off on his own, and the Seattle production had called me. They had heard me on public radio when I did a 1-hour weekend show called The Savvy Traveler, and said, we'd like to, would you be interested in hosting a television travel show? We'd like to do it a little more upscale. Rick's sort of a backpacky guy, a little more emphasis on food and perhaps wine. And so I said, sure. So that's sort of how I became interested. I've always been interested in different cuisines. And in the most recent 6 shows, which I won't date us, but in November of 2017 debuted on public television in the United States, all 6 shows, 3 in Japan, 2 in Hong Kong, 1 in Bangkok, are travel, but also a very heavy emphasis on food, with a friend of mine, a Japanese trained chef, Daisuke Utagawa from DC, as my co-host. So it's really now, the shows we're going on in the future are going to have much more emphasis on food, but it's not all fancy. I mean, in Bangkok we did nothing, I think we did nothing but street food, pretty much.
Wow.
So it's not, you know, we're not talking celebrity chefs here. I mean, we are in some cases, you know, if we're in France, we might go to, and I remember in Hong Kong, we did do a meal at a Michelin-starred chef's restaurant, but Daisuke is not impressed necessarily with Michelin stars. So he's just as happy as am I eating at a fabulous food stall in Bangkok, you know, that's making amazing whatever, salad or fish outside, as I might be by a Michelin-starred chef in Paris.
You mentioned journalism. As I recall, you were with the Washington Post in quite a different
capacity
and genre. It wasn't travel, was it?
No, when I graduated from college, I went to the Washington Post and I became an investigative reporter. And I was at the Post for 11 years as a columnist. I did what might colloquially be called a gossip column. The Post never called it gossip, still doesn't, but it was a personalities column. And I did that for 11 years, and then I went to the city magazine called The Washingtonian for 9 years, again as a senior writer, and I also did a personalities column. So for 11 plus 9, 20 years, I was an investigative reporter in Washington and started doing some travel pieces for various magazines, and then the internet became popular, or started to become popular, and a new thing called AOL, and MSNBC.com and ABC.com asked me to start writing regular travel columns or travel pieces, and I just started doing more and more. It started taking over my life. And so I really have 2 phases of my professional career as a Washington, D.C. investigative reporter who caused a lot of trouble with sex scandals and money scandals involving politicians, and then as a travel journalist. People are a lot happier to see the travel journalists than they did this one. So.
Yeah. The latest episode of sex scandals with Harvey Weinstein, who I got to know myself.
Not too well, I hope.
Not too well, no. But ironically, and not to interject too much here, I think it'd be interesting for people to know that Mr. Weinstein, when I knew him, by the way, he pronounced it Weinstein, not Weinstein. So I don't know. Today's journalists, it's been accepted, and apparently he hasn't made much noise about it. But
okay, President Trump just pronounced it Tanzania instead of Tanzania in a national address.
Wonderful, wonderful. Does that sort of stuff drive you crazy too? Or
yeah, well, particularly with the President of the United States talking about an important country in Africa, it's a little...
Yeah, and I think he made up a name of another country.
I believe he did too.
Zambia or something like that.
He made something up, yeah.
But
reminds me when I was the bureau chief of Spy magazine, we would do pranks. We'll come back, you got to come back to your Harvey Weinstein story, but we once sent a letter to every member of Congress from the country of Fredonia. Now, if you know your Marx Brothers movie, that was a made-up country. There is no Fredonia. But this letter, I don't know if we said it was from the ambassador in the UN or whether it was from the president of Fredonia. It said, basically it said, "Dear Congressman, you know, the communists are trying to take us over or trying to infiltrate our government. Can we count on you for help?" And the number of very serious letters we got back say, "We stand with Fredonia, arm and, you know, shoulder to shoulder." We had great fun with that. Spy was a satirical magazine. In fact, we were the ones that nicknamed the then New York City real estate mogul Donald Trump the thick-fingered grabbarian. And any reference in Spy magazine, no matter what story or what anything, it was always thick-fingered grabbarian Donald Trump. So he didn't like Spy much. He didn't like the press back then much.
Well, no.
Unless it wrote nicely about him.
Of course, of course. But
so Harvey Weinstein, so you met him.
Yeah, I had a Hollywood interview show, actually, which I taped and edited here at this particular studio, CCX.
Oh my goodness.
CCX Studios, which Channel 12 here in Minneapolis, and so anyway, actually Brooklyn Park will be
to be precise.
Park, yes, but anyway, during one of the junkets where I was interviewing these stars of new films, I was invited by Mr. Weinstein's publicist, Peggy Belines was her name, and and to have dinner with him at a restaurant across from the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
So it was just Mr. Weinstein, Peggy, and myself. And she did it as a nice favor because, well, you know, with my face, you have to have people do favors for you.
Right. With my face, I shouldn't be on TV. So.
Come on, you're great. You're great. But anyway, so we got to start to get talking about different things, and I had been hired to do publicity for a charity tennis tournament in Forest Hills, New York, for the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, and I think I write about it in my book. But anyway, he said, my sister has a son who has juvenile diabetes. He says, how much are they wanting to raise? And I told him it was $250,000. He said, I'll give $100,000.
Oh my goodness.
And he did. He did.
My goodness.
And because of it, I got my friends Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira to be celebrity hosts at the event, although Jerry and Ann didn't play tennis, but I mean, just their names
brought in people. Right?
Brought in people. So that was, that showed he did have a philanthropic side to him.
Wow, even back then, and that was a while before he was as rich as he is now.
That's right, yeah. He actually offered me an interview with Madonna that next day, and it was a conflict with an interview I had to do for the film company, the other film company, and so I had to turn down this private
Who was the other interview with? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Madonna?
But I just didn't want to, you know.
I would have gone with Madonna.
Yeah, but then the film company would never invite me back to do any more, more interviews. Okay. So I had to say no. And it would have been a one-on-one, just private interview. So anyway, I digress. I apologize.
That's all right.
Yeah. Have you noticed anything different about, I mean, the world today regarding travel? A lot of people are scared to go different places. What's your thinking about that?
Let me take the first part about being different. It's certainly different because we as individuals have so much more information at our fingertips. Because you remember, I mean, anybody over the age of, over the age of 40, maybe even younger, remembers if you wanted to fly from A to B and didn't know which airline flew, you might call American Airlines, and unless the reservationist on the phone was kind, he or she would say, oh, well, we don't fly there. If they were kind, they might say, oh, well, we don't, but call United or call American or whatever. Call another airline, in short. But now, of course, with a couple clicks, we can see a whole menu of what airlines fly, where, when, how many seats are available, what seats are available, whether I can upgrade, how much it costs, and same with hotels and rental cars and so on. So travel has become much more, we have so much more information at our fingertips. So I think that's the sea change in travel. As far as fear of traveling, well, there's always been a fear of traveling. I know people all my life who won't go somewhere because they're afraid if English isn't spoken, they'll, who knows, wander off, get lost, and never be found again. But as it relates to terrorism, which is I think what you were probably getting at, what I say to my friends are, the incidents are so random. I mean, Vegas, a disco in Miami, heck, the federal building in Oklahoma City. If I had asked anybody, hey, can you, if I give you, because this is really important, I get this package of the federal building in Oklahoma City, would you, take that out there as $1,000, whatever, to go do it? There's nobody going to go, I'm not going to Oklahoma City. Are you kidding me? Yet, of course, an American guy backs a truck filled with explosive fertilizer stuff and blows the front off the front of the federal building years ago, and over 100 people killed. I mean, the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, who knew? You can't predict these things. Are you not going to go anywhere because of that? I have friends who won't go to the Mall of America here in the Twin Cities because they're afraid that's a target. Well, every place is a target where people gather. Are you going to stay at home the whole time? I remember once I was interviewing a pilot. He's now a writer with Vanity Fair named William Langavici. He's a heck of a writer. He stopped piloting and became a writer. But when he was a pilot, I remember I was hosting a public radio show called The Savvy Traveler, and there had been a terrible airline disaster. An airplane had caught fire. It was a Swiss air flight, as I recall. Caught fire just over Newfoundland. It's the electronics for the entertainment system. There was something wrong with the wires and caught fire. And they were trying to get back to land in Newfoundland safely, and it didn't, and everybody died. And it was, you know, huge news and a lot of deaths. And I had to do the show the next day, and I had William Langevici on, and I said, Mr. Langevici, what do you say to folks who are afraid to get on an airplane now? And I thought he was going to do what I and many other people do, whether you're a travel journalist or not, say, well, you know, drive to the airport is more important, more dangerous than getting on a plane. And the odds of you dying in the United States by a kick in the head with a donkey, slip in a bathtub, lightning strike, are all greater than your odds you're going to die in an airplane crash. That's what we always said, to try to comfort people. He said, he took the tough love approach, I think. He said, Rudy, who among us gets to choose when we're going to die? It's like, whoa, hello, Mr. Pilot? He said, we don't get to choose these things. You could walk out the front of your house and, you know, go into the street, accidentally get hit by a car. Who gets to choose? The answer, of course, is not many of us do.
No.
So I just think, I mean, I have friends, you know, should I go to Paris? Should I go to Madrid? Should I go to London? Of course you should. I mean, you're probably statistically more likely to be killed by a random bullet in Chicago than you are to be killed in a terrorism incident in, name a city, Paris, London, Madrid, anywhere.
Incredible.
So, and the numbers are so minuscule. The number of Americans who have been killed in terrorism incidents is so tiny, 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 tiny. Of course, if it's you, it's not a small number. Mm-hmm. But then again, you know, don't go outside when it's raining because you might die from lightning. So.
Yeah. What about the airlines themselves? I mean, I know that your program certainly involves showing the fact that airlines get you to where you've
a lot of air travel,
going.
Sure.
Yeah. How many miles have you?
I have no idea.
Millions, probably.
Yes, certainly. In the 30 years since frequent flyer miles were invented, I've certainly flown millions.
Yeah. But what I was thinking was the airlines. Some of the airlines bent to just almost penalize you for bringing an extra cookie on board, or
well, they found out
something
they can,
like that.
Well, look, we're getting what we pay for and what we deserve. I remember for decades people were saying, "Oh, it's so cramped in coach." So American, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, took 2 rows out of coach and spread everybody back. They saw no increase in reservations, even though they advertised it widely. We have extra leg room. You know, we're American Airlines. We've taken out these rows of seats. Don't fly those other airlines. They're too cramped. Never changed because American, well, I think probably all people buy on the basis of price and schedule and frequent flyer points that they want to accumulate on an airline. So American put the rows back in after several years. It wasn't working. And they were just losing revenue because all their competitors had those 2 extra rows and were making more money. Mm-hmm. We're getting what we asked for. And when Americans discovered, when U.S. airlines discovered, well, now all airlines discovered they could make all these fees for charging extra for better seat location, for luggage, for premium economy, forget business or first class, they're now addicted to it. They make billions of dollars on it. And fair enough, if you don't want to fly in cramped economy, you may have to pay $10 to $82, depending on the distance you're flying, to move up to a room with a seat with 4 more inches of legroom. But we have gotten what we have asked for. American gave us our chance. If everybody had flocked to American because that extra legroom, United and Delta and every other airline in those days, U.S. Airways and TWA, all would have taken out those rows of seats, but nobody flocked to them.
Incredible. That's
now, there are ridiculous charges. I am not defending the airlines. I mean, if you decide you want to change, let's say you've got a trip 3 months ahead of now, right, 3 months away, and you want to change your return flight to same destination, or you want to leave 1 day later or 1 day earlier, they're going to charge you $200 for a change fee. That's ridiculous. Yeah. It takes them 1, 2, or 3 keystrokes to take you off flight 321 and put you on flight 281. And they ask you domestically for a $200 change fee. That's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's highway robbery.
We have to live with it.
Yeah, what are you going to do? You can only vote with your feet and not fly that airline, but you already bought a ticket, so you're going to pay the $200 because you've already invested $500.
I love train travel.
Yes.
And it's interesting. We used to take the Empire Builder out to Whitefish, Montana mm-hmm. from here because my children lived out there at the time. And I noticed, and I was told by the conductor, because we had a bedroom suite, and it was rock and roll and rock and roll. But we went in the spring, and he told me, he said, don't ever take trains, our train anyway, in the spring, because the weather, the different temperature variations affect the rails. They expand and they contract, they expand and contract. He said the best time to travel really is in the winter because they're
frozen.
Yeah, they're frozen.
I've never heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, but we took the TGV from Paris down to Cannes one year, and it was, well, you know, you've been on those high-speed trains, but it's just miraculous. You don't feel anything,
No.
and of course you're going, what, 140 miles an
At
hour,
least,
200 miles an hour, and wow. Do you think that we're ever going to get to that point here in the States?
I fear we're not. I mean, you know, everything's possible in the long future, but certainly not in the near future. I just rode the TGV, the Train Grand
Vitesse.
Vitesse, right?
Yeah.
The TGV from Dijon to Paris, hour and 10 minutes, as I recall, 2 weeks ago. And I was just reminded of how smooth those welded tracks are and how it's like being on a cloud. The problem with America is we're so huge that there are very few big cities close enough to make it economically viable. Really, the only economic viable place would be the East Coast: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, Washington. Because the cities are so close and people would use it to commute rather than fly, because by the time you go to an airport, you can go to the train station and get there faster. Long and short of it is, the problem with East Coast corridor, it is so crowded and so built up to get the right of way is so expensive to be able to run a straight track that they would love to do it. You know, we have the Acela there that's supposed to be able to go, I think, 90 miles an hour, but it has to slow down for curves and track that's not as great as it should be. So we just, you know, and they say they're building one between LA and San Francisco. It won't happen in my lifetime, but they actually broke ground on it. They say, well, we could go Chicago to, you know, Cleveland
Or Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Well, we do have a light rail between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Oh, Chicago, you mean Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul? Yes, right, except there was a plan to do it, and the then governor of Wisconsin put the kibosh on it. You couldn't build it without going through Wisconsin. So there seem to be a lot of roadblocks there. I don't think we'll ever have the high-speed train travel that Europe, Japan, and China enjoy, sadly.
Of all the countries, what is the easiest, what has been the easiest for you to travel in which to travel, I should say?
Well, there's travel and then there's shooting. To travel in, obviously anywhere there are English signs and English is spoken is easier for someone who doesn't speak another language. Though I can't think of a major city in the world where you can't find an English speaker, or you can't get a way around, or signs aren't posted in English enough for you to feel comfortable. Shooting is another matter. So the toughest places to shoot are like London and Paris and Rome, because they have so many people wanting to shoot there.
And you're talking about shooting
television shows.
Television shows.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
and not shooting people.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
I'm talking about shooting television shows because you have to get permits for everything, and everybody's so tired of television cameras. I remember we were shooting in Paris, and we wanted to show how easy it was to buy a 7-day pack of metro tickets, and we had permission from the city, from the metro authorities, to shoot inside a metro station. So we go down the metro station, we go up to the window, and I'm supposed to be shot saying, could I have whatever the 7-day trip pack was called? And the woman pulled the curtain down behind the curtain and said, no, didn't want to have anything to do with television. I remember walking down a street in Paris, there was an empty street, virtually empty, and there were restaurants on both sides, but it was a long shot. And way down to the right, some guy comes out of a restaurant wearing a chef's apron, and he goes, no, 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 no. You know, my joke to friends is, I think everybody in Paris is in the witness protection program.
I love it.
But you shoot in places, we were just shooting in Hong Kong and Thailand, and they just walk right by you. In other cities, they stand and they put this behind your head, you know, they do this, or they mug for the camera and put a big smile in front of the camera. In some of those crowded countries, third world countries, they could care less. I do remember shooting in Shanghai, probably about 10 years ago, and we were in a main pedestrian street in Shanghai, a shopping center. And so the camera's in front of me, and I have to walk toward the camera, and I'm saying something about something. and this massive army of people on both sides of this invisible line, about 100 people, 200 people on both sides, stand there to watch this event. And of course, you have to do it 6 or 7 times because your producer always wants to get it right, you know. And so and at first they were sort of encroaching a little. My producer asked them to sort of, they all went back as if they were on, you know, sliding floors. They all very, very respectful, very quiet. So I do this thing 5 or 6 times, and when it's finally a wrap and it's all over, they all burst into applause. I've delivered like 2 sentences. You'd think I'd delivered an entire Shakespearean play by memory or something. So it's different in every city. It's a lot of fun. But I do like, you shoot in Uzbekistan, you shoot in Hong Kong, you shoot in Bangkok, and it's just, people are just busy going about their business, and they don't mug for the camera, they don't get in your way, they don't put the thing behind your head. You know, it's
yeah. And has there ever been a time? It's kind of the last question. Has there ever been a time when you have been afraid regarding shooting?
No, never been afraid shooting. But in Uzbekistan, we were going to shoot my closing shot on a camel in the town of Hiva. There was one camel in the center of town under a tree, and with its owner. And for $1, you could put your kid on the camel and take a picture. And my producer thought it'd be a great way to close the show. So she said, "Hey, tonight when the light's right, we're going to put our TV show host on." And the guy said, "Not a really good idea." And my producer said, "Well, how about $50, which is probably a week's salary for this guy, or pay for this guy?" Okay. So we go back in the nice light around 7, 8 o'clock at night. It was summer. And I get on this camel. There's no saddle, no rope, no nothing, just a bareback camel. And there's a ladder I get on. And Catherine the camel walks down the street with her owner carrying her and feeding her bread. You can't see that on camera. But he's carrying her by rope and feeding her bread. I deliver my line to the camera. Everything's fine. Producer wants it again. We go back. I get up on the camel. Catherine will have no more of television. I feel this enormous heaving. I go up into the air, and I'm high enough up to look down on the cobblestones and go, this is not going to be pretty. So I was unconscious. I had stitches in my head, and I broke my right clavicle. So mine is a dangerous job, Barry.
Wow.
Dangerous
Apparently
job.
So. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much, Rudy.
Thank you for having me on, Barry.
Dear friend. Rudy very kindly was one of the people who endorsed the back of my book. Endorsed the book.
Don't show the back of the book. You got to show the front of the book.
That's right. We endorsed it on the back.
Barry ZeVAN, My Life Among the Giants, a memoir.
Thank you. It's available on Amazon, and Rudy is also written about in the book, part of the book.
Now you can skip over that part.
No,
just
never.
buy the book. There's a lot of celebrity juice in there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Barry.
Deeply appreciate it. And we hope that you'll join us next time for FYI with Barry ZeVAN. And we have some really good guests coming up in the future, too. Paul Douglas from television here in the Twin Cities, former Vice President Mondale, even Sam Donaldson via Skype, and Doug Llewellyn from the People's Court. Bye until next time.